Hi, I'm Lucy Steigerwald, and this is Politics for People Who Hate Politics for the lovely, lovely website Liberty.me. And today, as usual, we've had some bumps in terms of getting a panel together, but we have exciting people, and we have someone who's going to join us a little later. But we're going to start. We've got Joe Steigerwald, who is my brother, and he's pretty all right, and he plays bass guitar in a band.
Thank you.
Um, Thank you, Joe.
Glad to
And
be here.
no, it's not. And we also have Jeffrey Tucker, the Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me and a distinguished fellow at the Foundation for Economic Education.
Well,
And
I'm actually thrilled that you invited me. Actually, I mean, it was a long time coming, and I'm just glad. I mean, your podcast has been around now for a couple of months, and this is my first time. So thank you.
thank you. I had to work up to it. Manuel told me it would be okay. But
What could that possibly mean that you had to work up to it?
I don't know.
Uh,
You're an important fellow. You're a Chief Liberty Officer. That's that
Okay.
means something in my world, damn it.
Well, I've been admiring your work and your writings for a long time. So, and I think when did we meet the first time? Not this most recent time. Where was it? Where did we meet the first time? I can't quite remember.
We met in Pittsburgh after your speech at
Yeah,
Duquesne last
that's
year,
right.
just for
Last
like a couple minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and then again we met in Pittsburgh, right?
Only once in Pittsburgh. I've only seen you in real life twice. And the
Okay.
Philly thing was the most recent one, and that was the
Okay.
most rewarding.
Yeah, Philly. That was a good conference, actually. Didn't you think that went
Mhm.
well? Yeah, I
It
liked.
wasn't good. I spoke at the Pittsburgh one the week after, so I'm a little biased, but the Philly one was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I can tell you it was much better than the Harvard one.
Oh, Harvard.
But yeah, the Harvard one was disappointing. You know, you think, oh well, that's everything that's important in the world is to go to Harvard or something. But it just ended up being just not quite what all that you hoped it would be.
I know a kid who went to Harvard for a semester, and he was not impressed. And he's a very smart guy, so that's usually what I think of when I think of Harvard now.
What's he doing now?
He's gonna be an orthopedic surgeon, and I was trying to talk him out of being a medic in the armed forces. Still working on that.
Okay.
Um, all right, so Corey Massimino allegedly is going to wander in here a little later, but I think we're going to jump into our proper, official, written down type topics. And I wanted to start with what might be a shorter one, and that's the Obama and immigration thing. He's supposed to give his, I guess by the time some people watch this, it'll be a little out of date, but he's supposed to give his big speech about his big executive order amnesty type plans at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I've seen mostly on the internet, I've seen a lot of libertarians praising this. But I kind of get the uncomfortableness, right? Because we're depending on an executive order to do something good. And I guess I'm wondering how uncomfortable we should be or shouldn't, assuming that we actually kind of like this plan to give amnesty to a lot of immigrants who are not here with their proper papers and all.
Well, we obviously do like the plan, right? I mean, it's fantastic, and we also recognize that the Congress is going to be forever tangled up in this whole subject and would never actually do the right thing. So, so yeah, an executive action like this seems entirely reasonable, and yet I understand your point. It's like, so
Just a
we
little,
favor,
yeah.
right? We favor sort of dictatorial executive impositions that are not even slightly democratic when they go with the things we like, and then when they do things we don't like, we criticize the means by which they're done, right? So there's an
Sounds
element of
right.
yeah, there's an element of hypocrisy here, for sure. The other thing, and I'm not even sure I would know what to say about that exactly, because we do live in an executive-style dictatorship, as compared with as what I understand of the original framing of the the Constitution and all that nonsense. Congress is supposed to have, the energy behind government was supposed to come from Congress, through the people, like that, right? And then over the course of a couple hundred years, we developed this nation-state apparatus of this gigantic executive branch that has virtually all power. And Congress, if you look at the organizational charts of government, has very little control over anything. I mean, they it's like they can decide what newspapers are on display in the reading room of the Library of Congress, but not much more than that.
Not much more.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary how disproportionate the executive. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the executive branch is the state as we know it.
It's certainly shorthand. Like if you talk about the state, you might just say Obama did X, Y, and Z, and you mean the whole federal apparatus. At least I do that.
Right. Treasury Department, Housing and Urban Development, Labor Department, NSA, housing, whatever, the Homeland Security, and Pentagon. The whole of the government that we know about is essentially the executive branch. That's really true. Which is not to say it's the same thing as Obama, because it operates independent of the will of any executive. The other thing, there's a little bit of a Roman history here that's a little bit creepy, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons that the Republic, became an empire was because of the corruptions inherently in the empire, that were inherent in the empire. The legislature is always tangled up. The senators are always arguing with each other. There's this massive graft and corruption, and so Caesars took control in response to this corruption. No different from Hitler, really, essentially. So there's a kind of a long history of dictators assuming power in light of the political failings of legislatures. So I kind of get that. All that said, I think there's an element of hypocrisy to here too, because I'm sure we're going to see conservative Republicans denouncing, and they're doing this already, right?
Mm-hmm. Denouncing for all the wrong reasons, of course.
All the wrong reasons, right? So they're against these kind of actions when Obama's doing something that they want him to do, and which I think is really the real hypocrisy, actually. That's what's really going on here. So, if I were president, God forbid, right? But I would use whatever power I could to give as much liberty to as many people as I possibly could. I think so. Let's just say why not? Why not? We are not hypocrites. We're actually advancing a consistent principle. When power is used to bring more people liberty, to overcome those who are denying others liberty, I think that's a just use of power.
It's better than the alternative. It's better than not doing it, because him not doing it is not going to reduce his. I'm not seeing it reducing his powers. He's still going to believe that he has all the rights that he possesses. People on sort of Facebook libertarian groups were saying, well, Ryan Calhoun, the Center for a Stateless Society guy, was saying I guess the king's got to keep all their prisoners in the cell until the revolution's all over with. There's an element of just how could you protest this? Because it's sure to be sort of a it's stop enforcing the law, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And we shouldn't object to that unless we were constitutionalists. Joe, are you too constitutionalist for this conversation?
No, I was just going to say, I guess the key is just to pick the right president, and we'll just keep going through them until we find one that grants us the liberty that we deserve. And that's
that could backfire.
Right. That's kind of how it's going at this point anyway. Like Jeffrey said, the Congress, I don't think they'll ever pass anything on immigration until maybe if there's enough illegal immigrants, it can shift the balance of Congress or whatever, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. So, what do we do? I'm a little more on the fence, I think, because I don't like the way it's going with the executive power, but it's hard to say. It's hard to be against it in this instance, but what about the next time Obama uses, the executive action? Is it hypocritical to be against it then? Yeah, it is, but I guess it's small victories here and there.
I think you make me realize something important fact here. The Immigration Naturalization Service and the State Department and all the U.S. passport offices and the citizenship, whatever, yada yada, all operates under the executive branch. So all this executive order really amounts to is a very tiny sliver of freedom in the sense that he's declining to use the powers of the state against a certain number of people who have the right to be here and work here anyway. So I'm just, thank you for your comment, because it makes me realize that this isn't an act of power. It really is a declining to use power in specific instances, which I think we should always celebrate. What do you think about that, Lucy?
Declining to use a power, or freeing somebody from the jail of waiting to be deported. And if we were strict constitutionalists or strict process-oriented people, I guess there would be a reason to object to this more. But the point of being ridiculously, unnecessarily radical is that you're worrying about the individuals and you're not worrying about, well, we didn't go through the process and we didn't count this and sign that and that sort of thing. It's a very anarchistic idea to say that we don't care how it happens as long as people are freer. It's beyond what conservatives are comfortable with, certainly, even if they weren't weird on immigration. Which is weird, because Ronald Reagan, their BFF, had a giant amnesty thing in '86. And at some point, they really switched around on immigration and became the party of being totally terrified by it. But their boy Reagan, I can't remember how many people his amnesty hit, but it was a couple million, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Reagan was able to get with. Sometimes I think everything we think about politics is just wrong. Because it turns out that it's quite often true that you elect Democrats and they are able to get away with freeing things, deregulating in ways that you wouldn't have expected. Carter's the one who gave us trucking and oil and telecommunications deregulation and all the rest of it, and banking deregulation and everything. Carter was a wonderful president in retrospect, and Clinton did a series of wonderful things, got rid of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, privatized the internet, privatized the radio waves, and also did the welfare reform famously, right? And that was probably a marginally good thing. But meanwhile, Richard Nixon was terrible. The Bushes were horrible. And Reagan was interesting because he's the one who negotiated the treaty with Gorbachev to eliminate all nuclear weapons, right? I mean, it didn't actually happen, but still, it was kind of a nice thing.
Nice sentiment, certainly.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's you think you know, but then it turns out you don't know, So that's why I don't trust politics at all. People say, oh, well, so-and-so would make a much better president than so-and-so. I don't know how you know that, really. I mean, it's just completely random, it seems to me.
You definitely don't know. I mean, I wouldn't presume that all presidents were, sort of literally sociopaths, but the idea that the right guy in the office would fix everything, that is a dangerous idea that I think liberals are most committed to. The Carter thing is...
and libertarians.
Well,
many libertarians are into that question too.
But our favorite guy in office is going to be you, or somebody who abolishes the office, 45 minutes after freeing people from prison and deregulating everything, and then you probably quit the office. We hope. You might be corrupted, even you. It's hard to say.
Well, I think a big problem with the presidency is that it's not a real institution in any sense. I mean, okay, so I'm the chief liberty officer of Liberty.me, and I spend a good part of my day trying to keep up with everything that's going on the website, and almost every day there's things going on that surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a staff of 12, 15, something like that. A network, that's probably no more than a couple dozen or something like that. That's got effective admin rights. I can't even possibly keep up with what's going on in my own company. It's too much for one individual, really. And it's the same. Any business owner knows this, right? You can't possibly keep up with it, no matter how big or small the business is. It's too much for any one person really to manage. Then you think about the presidency, right? So you've got this president who's basically ruling over of this gigantic, the world's biggest government, with 3 million employees. The idea that he could possibly, and he spends most of his time getting briefings and meeting dignitaries and being a marionette on stage, the idea that he's somehow a president can manage anything like a system of government is utterly crazy and contrary to everything we know about, economizing on time and so on. I mean, I bet, Lucy, in your own life, and Joe, probably is true for you too, there are things that you're supposed to be sort of in charge of that, you lose track of, right? I mean, imagine if you were president of the United States, right?
The conceit involved is still amazing. I don't know if either of you ever read Gene Healy's Cult of the Presidency, which is a very good book. And the interesting thing about it is that it's not just about how appallingly royal and pomp and circumstance filled the presidency became over the past couple hundred years. There's a lot of that. There's stuff in there that surprised me, even though I'm pretty good at history. But there's also the double-edged thing about the presidency and the way people feel about him now is that they ask too much of him. They grant him too much power while asking more still. And that's why the president has to chime in and express his condolences about a hurricane here or there, or Obama's ridiculously grand, I don't remember if it was his inaugural speech, all about how the seas were going to, fall back because of the global warming, and this was going to be the moment when it all happened. It's absolutely grandiose in just the most irrational way. So we grant them too much power, and then we ask more of them still. They can control the economy, apparently, completely.
Right, we blame them for everything, and we want them to take credit for everything, just depending on what side we're on. And largely, I think it is. That's what you said, Lizzie. Obama can't control the economy. He can't do all this stuff, and yet, when we talk about government, like you mentioned earlier, we say, Obama for almost everything.
Yeah, the shorthand of it, I do the shorthand all the time, and it's probably not a good habit. Much like saying we invaded Iraq is a bad habit. I was having a tonsillectomy at the time. I was not anywhere near there. I don't think Joe was either.
No, I was there.
Okay, my mistake.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, we have this. What happened the other day with Obama and the Ebola case? I don't know if you remember that there was a panic about a month ago that we were all it's long gone, but we were all going to get Ebola, like tomorrow.
Right.
And you had right, and so you had to walk around with like a mask on your face or whatever, and. So that's gone. But there was some nurse in Texas or something like that who recovered from Ebola. It turns out most people do. Mm-hmm. And he immediately flew her to Washington and embraced her, and was hugging her and holding her up.
It's so awful.
Right, it's so awful. And it's appalling because there's a sense in which Obama, is the not just the great bringer of freedom to the world, but also the healer. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's an element of Christ-likeness about
he wants
this guy,
credit
right?
for the healing. If he's there, he's associated with a woman being healthy now. Corey Massimino.
Of course, if Ebola had spread, he would have been the chief. If she had died,
Well, that's just the thing.
Right.
That's exactly it. So you can't do anything right, really, right? So like I was having heaping disdain on this guy for embracing the recovering Ebola person, as if he had healed her in some way. But if he doesn't do something, then suddenly he's attacked, for ignoring the Ebola crisis. So he's supposed to heal the world. What the hell is wrong with you?
It always makes him defend the presidency, and we obviously can't do that because
then it becomes a referendum on Obamacare, and how it didn't save us from Ebola. So.
From Ebola.
It will, Joe. Give it time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's exactly it. I mean, I think your point is well taken. I mean, the problem is not so much any particular president. The problem is the presidency itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the great evil.
And that's why the people who say, "Oh, well, you got to respect the office if you don't respect the man," and I actually went to the White House press correspondence dinner once as a guest of the politics editor of the Denver Post, and I didn't applaud once, and it was hard not to because just the sort of skin-crawling situation of the earnest applause for the president. And I don't know if I would have gone straight to hell if I had applauded as a libertarian, but it's the man and it is the office. It's all of it, damn it. And speaking of that, I'm going to try to make that transitional. Oh, and also here's Corey, and Corey Massimino. I don't know.
So I want to know about Corey's opinion about this. I mean, do you think it's an act of executive dictatorship and abuse to amnesty so many illegal immigrants like this, or do you think it's consistent with the libertarian outlook?
I think it's completely. I think libertarians should be completely fine with it. I think immigration laws are so obscene that I really don't mind the president doing that. I mean, I think from a position of I don't think anyone has a moral duty to respect a law just because it's a law, right? So I mean, I'm fine with using whatever means necessary to get rid of bad laws.
Yeah, I mean, almost. Well, no, executive orders. I guess precedent comes into play as well. Like passing a new law sometimes it can be worse because you're making sure that someone's going to read carefully with a fine-tooth comb and say, well, the word law right here means that we get to put you in jail for fun. I mean, the element of law is look at the precedent and like how could we interpret this to make it what we want it to be. And I mean, I don't know. That could be worse, I guess. I don't know.
Still in the Carbides.
Pardon?
Greek stuff.
Greek stuff.
I believe Sting sang about it in a Police song.
Joe, you're more acquainted with both Police songs and with Greek history than I am, so I'm gonna let you keep that one.
Rock and Hard Place.
I'm sorry. I picked up Mom's impression that Sting is a douche, so I haven't paid attention to the Police in a while.
Well, I was talking about the Greek, the Charybdis or whatever how you say it.
Okay, if you could pronounce it, that would help us more.
Choose between two evils.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah, no, okay. Corey Massimino writes for a million different things, like Center for a Stateless Society, and he's a campus coordinator for Students for Liberty, and he wrote for my blog one time, and he's written for Anti-War.
Twice. I wrote for your blog twice.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So he writes lots of good things.
Libertarian post just because you're so, adamantly against us for no reason.
I'm adamantly against you, Corey.
Well,
just your whole existence.
I mean, that's understandable.
Yes. And Corey recently wrote something that just annoyed everybody about rape culture and spontaneous order and.
No, it's not annoying. Someone offered to give me a hug on Twitter.
I don't know if you want to go into this a little bit, but
oh God,
no, we don't. But Charles Johnson's original article on this challenged me fundamentally. I mean, my head exploded when I read it, and when I saw him the next week at the anarchist meetup, I was like, ready to strangle him and all this stuff. I have to say though that over time he did shift my view a little bit in his direction. To the point that I feel like I'm a little bit more adapted to that point of view. So by the time Corey Massimino's article came out, I was prepared for it, and I didn't become apoplectic or something when I read it.
What was your objection initially? Was it the premise? Because Charles doesn't argue that rape culture exists; he just assumes it. Was your premise that was your objection that you don't think it exists, or was your objection that you don't think spontaneous order can be applied to that?
Both. But I would want to qualify that in a number of different ways, and I don't know if we want to get into it. But I understand what he's saying about spontaneous order. There's something that rubs me wrong about using that term to describe something so egregious. The idea of rape culture strikes me as being, there's a grain of truth to it, and maybe more than a grain of truth to it, but it seems to be more of a Hegelian notion of sort of structural social dynamics kind of idea that's very. It reminds me of Marxism in a way, because it removes individual volition and intention from the problem. And yet I think for
reduces it at least. I mean, I don't know if
Yeah.
it removes it entirely, but it definitely downplays it. And
it
I know
does
that
downplay it, yeah.
that's bothered some rape organization, RAIN. I forget what that stands for exactly, but they actually wrote that they don't like the term rape culture because they decided it downplays the culpability of individual people.
Exactly, and this is a potential problem. I see it strikes me as less focused on crime and more focused on ideology, and that worries me.
It's not specifically about the act of violence itself. It's just about the kind of cultural norms and societal attitudes that comes out of the act of violence. I mean, I made the analogy, and because actually just a few hours ago, someone wrote on Liberty Me a response directly to me for that article, and I read it in the comments. I made the analogy that the author Sarah Meyer, she made the point that rape is just an individual act of violence, and it just she didn't want to go any further with saying there was such a thing as rape culture. But for me, it's just the same as state violence. State violence is the same. I don't think it's on the same magnitude in individual acts of taxation or something compared to rape. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that state violence is an individual act of violence, but the kind of culture that it creates, it becomes normalized.
I get that.
I see the taxation as theft, even though it is.
I totally get what you're saying, but the problem is that it's very much like Marxism in the sense that you posit this sort of irreconcilable conflict between capital and labor. And you say that that's the dynamic of history. That's the structural reality in which we live. And then the printer says, well, look, I just opened up a print shop and invited this guy to help me out, and I'm paying him to do it. I don't feel like I'm an exploiter. It's like, and the Marxist response was, well, you've got false consciousness.
I don't know if it's exactly the same. I don't see it as Hegelian because it's saying that it can be altered. It's not saying it's some sort of inevitable course of history that rape culture has to just dominate our society. Feminists are saying that it can be altered. That's why I'm writing an article like this. I don't think it's unchanged.
Comparing it to the legitimacy that the state enjoys, I think, is really pushing it, though. I think I agree with Jeff, actually, because I think that there's something to it as a concept, but I think it's very, very limited. The way that privilege is a thing, but it isn't, and you can't put everything in that box because, and left feminists love to use these special tools that they have. And I'm not like a right-winger and say that there's no truth to anything they say, but I think that they're very limited. And I think that rape culture is one of those limited concepts.
Corey, Lucy, and Joe, I have a proposed alternative to the phrase rape culture. Okay, I'm just not about attacking the use of that phrase because it's obviously taps into something really important. My suggestion is that the right term here is misogyny. Okay. Misogyny is an ideology. It's a philosophical outlook on life that expresses itself in a sort of an institutionalized and pervasive way of disparaging, putting down, marginalizing women. It shows up throughout the whole of human history. It's always on the verge of returning. It does express itself in our contemporary times. You can see a strain of it running through all of history, and it's something that you can get rid of. It's something that you can work yourself away from. But it's also individuated in the sense that you are either acting out of a misogynistic outlook or you are not. And so the term misogyny is really good because it doesn't kind of partake of this Hegelian historical dynamic, as if there's something taking place we don't know about, like the spontaneous society, the spontaneous order. It's a specific conscious loathing of women as women and an attempt to diminish and marginalize them for that reason. So I far prefer talking about the general problem of misogyny over the structural rape culture idea.
I mean, obviously, I think misogyny is an important issue too, but I think rape culture can be simultaneously useful because not only is it more specific, but people often forget that rape culture often can negatively affect men. So you can't say the same about misogyny is just about the way men treat women. Rape culture can have a negative effect on men too. For example, the way men tend to underreport rape because they feel like they either can't get raped or they feel not as masculine if they were raped or something. I mean, it hurts men too.
Right, but that's what I mean. Feminists also use that. Even the patriarchy, which I don't use either as terminology, but again has they like to say that the patriarchy hurts men too, and the idea that a man wouldn't want to report a rape because it would make him weak, they would put that under the category of, oh, that's the patriarchy for you. I mean, there's no empirical truth to any of this. It's all an interpretation of some things that occur. And what bothers me about liberal feminists to the ends of the earth is that they truly act as if the people who don't use their word choices are, advocating for their opposition. So they're advocating for rape culture.
Yeah.
That
Right,
drives me
I think
nuts.
that's a good point. So Corey, I'm slightly curious about your position on this because I tend to trust, probably wrongly, but I tend to trust your instincts and your politics and your outlook, and I take you very, very seriously actually as a thinker. Is there nothing? Is there no aspect of this notion of rape culture that makes you a little bit squeamish in light of what you understand about the sort of Hegelian Marxist, the historical deterministic view that all of history is driven by these anonymous forces of conflict we can't control? Is there nothing about this rape culture idea that troubles you in light of that, even given that most of its proponents are sort of partake of that ideological orientation?
Again, I don't think anything about rape culture implies that it's inevitable or anything like that, or it's just a product of the way people act within our culture. I don't really think it has to be kind of Hegelian in the sense that you're saying, where history drives towards rape culture. I think it's completely avoidable. Although there might be feminists that think it is that way, but I think they'd be wrong.
Well, so when I read Andrea Dworkin, what I read is somebody who says there's irreconcilable, intractable conflicts embedded in the structure of society that society itself cannot solve, absent some gigantic upheaval. And when I read things like that,
that's bullshit.
You think I've misrendered her?
No, I'm saying that idea is bullshit. That there's some sort of reconcilable men and women.
Yeah.
You have free will. That's total bullshit. That it's just like you said with Marx and labor versus capital. Like, it's just complete nonsense. It screws it up for the actual people that are saying that these things are within our power to change. It screws it up for the people who are actually proposing to change these things through the way we act towards the problems of rape. It's not. I just think that's total BS.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just prefer the solution of talking about the actual problem, which is misogyny. I mean, which is a real factor. From the ancient world, you can read about in Plato. You can see it in the witch burnings, but long before the Protestant Reformation, you see it in the legal disparagements of women in the Islamic world today, and in the United States today, and all sorts of forms of discrimination. And the availability of birth control, the fact that women's wombs are threatened to be nationalized every 4 years in elections, and so on and so on. I mean, misogyny is a very big reality in our world today, and always has been throughout the whole of history. Ebbs and flows, takes different forms. At least for me, intellectually, it makes a lot more sense to just talk about that pervasive problem.
It's funny that you mentioned it going back to Plato, because my favorite philosopher, I guess probably my favorite philosopher, Aristotle, had a good line that, well, actually, looking back, it was not good at all. It was horrible and wrong. But he said that mirrors turn red if women menstruate in front of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone empirically tested it. Like if anyone went back and and looked like maybe Aristotle was onto something, but I don't think he was. He also
apropos of what the fuck was that?
What?
Apropos of what the fuck was that, Corey? I missed the transition to that.
When you said Plato, it made me think of that Aristotle line that I just really like quoting for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, it's particularly riveting. The history of misogyny is a brilliant and exciting thing to read about. Actually, I mean, it's just utterly amazing. I didn't realize, until I began to dip into this literature that I mean, as you probably know, I'm a Catholic, and I didn't realize that one of the popes, and I forget now which one was pre-Borgia, we're talking about 13th century maybe, something like that, had issued a papal bull warning women not to have sex with the devil, and yeah,
that's a good tip.
Yeah. And said there was a pervasive problem, that he had heard very disturbing reports from all over Spain and Germany that many women had been having sex with the devil, and he was very troubled by this, and it led to just a rash of witch burnings. I mean,
it's not funny anymore.
No, I mean, really, I mean, it's an incredible thing to read about, and this is the Pope, right? I mean, so this is just nuts. This is anyway. This is just one little chapter.
I have a favorite pope. I'm not Catholic, and I don't know much. And I honestly don't remember his name. But at some point during the Black Plague, he was one of the non-Rome-based other popes. During the Black Plague, he issued a directive to not kill all the Jews because turns out they weren't causing this apocalyptic plague. And we're talking the 14th century, and blaming the Jews for everything was unfortunately something that was happening quite recently. So that guy's my favorite pope. I forget his name right now, but I thought I needed to speak well of a pope.
Probably one of the Borgias. The Borgia popes were actually very close with the Jews, which is just great. I mean, the more you read about the Borgias, the more you like them. I mean, they gave us great art. They were all in favor of commerce. There were missteps along the way, and so on and so on. But
this is a nicely enlightened thing, very anachronistically enlightened thing to announce that, because God only knew what was causing the Black Plague back then, but he was pretty sure it wasn't the Jews, and that was nice.
Well, maybe he decided it was women.
I haven't checked on that. That's a good point.
Lucy, I was going to make one interjection, unless we want to move on.
To popes? No, go on, Joe.
No, it was going back to rape culture.
Okay.
I think the word it's almost used as a buzzword now to kind of gather support for it. And I don't quite understand using rape as kind of the all-consuming word when it's more, it's the use of force against women is, I think, more apropos of what's been going on throughout, all of human history, basically. And, I think it is, getting better now, but it's still, force is the issue here. It's, ability to take over someone's life and control them, through either state means or, laws or whatever else, the patriarchy.
I agree. Force is ultimately the issue, right? I'm against force, but it seems undeniable to me that culture affects the way force is used. And again, with the state, again, it's totally different in degree. But the only reason the state is able to get away with all the violence and theft that it gets away with is because the culture allows for it. People just are like, oh, okay, well, I'm just paying, what I owe to the state, for services or whatever. That's why, we're trying to change culture ultimately, right? Because then that in turn affects what the state's able to do, what's able to get away with.
What I don't get is that where the message that somehow rape is not something to take seriously. I mean, I know that there are people who legitimately ask, oh, what was she wearing, etc., and they do, but I don't know wherever that message comes from. The message that the state is legitimate, and when it murders, it's not murder, and when it kidnaps, it's not kidnapping, that message is very easy to see. I don't know, I mean, if there is a subtle, whispering from culture that says, well, that slut was wearing a miniskirt, so it doesn't matter what I did to her. I mean, I don't see that. I think rape is inherently difficult to prove most of the time, which is terrible for victims and terrible for accused people.
True.
But if you know it happened, I think most people, they know it's bad. Maybe that's too optimistic, but the pessimism within the phrase is also something I take issue with.
I have a kind of broader theory about everything that's going on today, where we're attempting to. A good example is this recent legislation where colleges are attempting to ask, in the case of sex, for what is the phrase? It's like
affirmative consent is the phrase.
Affirmative consent, which by the way strikes me as a complete libertarian idea. I think when you go into the convenience store and buy a candy bar, you're looking for affirmative consent that you can walk away with it. And, I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But what the problem is trying to enshrine what used to be considered part of the court of taste and manners and decorum and decency on the part of men is now being legislated and imposed by law. And the question really is, like, why are we so driven to want to use law where really we should be taking recourse to culturally structural institutions and manners that emerge from our natural interactions of human beings, of one with another. And here's my answer to that. I think in the course of the 20th century, a war in particular shattered people's sense of decorum and decency, and blew away that kind of male chivalry that had accumulated over the course of the 19th century, and kind of shattered people's sense of the differences between men and women, and the civil ways of engaging one with another, and kind of broke down civil institutions to the point that we are today. And now trying to repair things and trying to cobble together something like a coherent social structure so that we can have social cooperation and a civilized life, and they're using legislation to do it, which is not the right means to do it. But I do think that there's a problem, and that problem really comes down to a shattering of the old standards of chivalry, seems to me.
Well, that's what the state tends to do in the long run. It always has to destroy civil institutions, because if without the state, the way you affect change is to just, first of all, change yourself, and then to when enough people do that, it changes culture automatically. When the state's involved, people don't have to take self-responsibility. They can just say, fuck it, we'll just pass a law, and that's somehow an automatic thing. That just automatically fixes the problem, and somebody else will do it for me. They don't have to change the way they act.
And then they somehow suggest it has the nuance that it obviously we know doesn't have. That there's this forever belief that a law will be passed and all else will follow, and it will all work out just as we hope it will. And we know that's not the truth. The truth in 10,000 cases. We know about black markets. We know that people aren't robots, and that there are dangerous consequences when, the prison industrial complex is up for more people to shove into it.
That's right. This is the great and grave problem of statist-style feminist agitation, is that what it's doing is leading to kind of a brutalist blowback, actually, that is very, very scary.
Yeah.
So it concerns me very much that this is going on. I'm obviously highly sympathetic with the ideals, feminist ideals, but the means that are currently employed in the name of feminism are creating monsters, actually. And it's very scary.
The state kind of codified
that. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, the state kind of codified that men were allowed to do these things to women. They were basically property for a lot of human history, and now, liberal feminists are kind of saying, okay, well, the laws just need to change, and then everything will be better. They don't kind of see that, like we were saying, these laws, there's always unintended consequences and all this other stuff, and it's just going to, make things worse in the end, unless we change culture.
Yeah, that's right.
Bother me in the same way that the statist left bothers me as self-identified feminist and a self-identified leftist, because the statist left, their whole narrative is the corporations control the government, so we need more government to fix the problem. And the feminists have rightfully
found this problem, man.
They have the same premise, but in terms of gender, men control the government, at least primarily and historically, obviously. So then, but somehow we need the government to fix the solution of patriarchy, as if the government wasn't the one instituting it and creating it. It's like it's the same fallacy with the statist left in terms of corporations and the statist feminists in terms of patriarchy. They both get it wrong.
Yeah, they both get it wrong, and it's very dangerous because it's actually exacerbating the problem. You know, in the same sense that Richard Nixon's war on pot, led to marijuana nation, basically. My concern is that this branch of feminism that imagines they can use power to bring about their ideals is actually creating a kind of a backlash culture in the form of the men's rights movement and worse, really. That's extremely troubling, and I don't so much blame feminists for this because they're responding to realities that are crying out for a fix. But it shows what happens when you get things wrong. It's like it's not enough to have the right goals; you also have to have the right means too, or else you're going to end up undermining your cause.
Hopefully, that's not a callback to mass amnesty, as we were wondering about before you got here, Corey.
It's all flat. Time is a flat circle, and says this podcast.
Seems like that should have been a segue into something, but since we've gone on this pretty solid but totally unexpected tangent, I don't know what to do.
Anarchy.
Quite. I was going to ask, we were going to have Marianne Copenhaver, our lovely libertarian girl. I don't know if we want to talk about this without her. We always can. It's also a long. It was just the same. The next topic was supposed to be the same damn thing about interacting with the state or not. And I kind of could spend like 2 hours trying to pick at Jeff's brain about the idea of who the state actually is, which is something that came up a little bit in the Bitches and Bourbon podcast a couple of days ago.
It's an absolutely fascinating topic. I think libertarians are completely get this wrong. I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary things to me that libertarians are so simple-minded towards the state. I mean, they have this opposition to the state, but it's like very few libertarians have any clue what it is, or even curiosity about how it functions and what constitutes the state apparatus itself. I mean, it's a very silly and simple-minded view of what the state is, and it's hard to find any literature. In fact, if you start digging into literature, because I got curious about this about a year ago, because I was going to be giving a series of lectures on the topic. I wanted to understand, what is the state and how it functions. Libertarian literature on the subject is incredibly thin and boring and repetitive, as compared with like. The only really great literature on the state is all written by Marxists. I mean, they understand what the state is and how it works much better than libertarians. I mean, it's an amazing thing, and it was all revealed to me. I mean, because you remember in 2012, everybody was wanting my dear friend Ron Paul to get elected and become president, and they thought that was going to fix everything. And you're just amazed at the level of naivety. There, like, what the hell is wrong with you? That you think that this is the answer. It's just pathetic and infantile, really, how libertarians tend to think that the state works and what the true fix is. Because, like I say, you have to go to the extreme left to really get a complex and dynamic. Some public choice literature, but really it's the Marxists who have the more complicated view of the state as a much more dynamic and a human-style institution than libertarians really understand it to be.
Well, it's our great enemy, so we tend to flatten out its nuances. Like any monster becomes a monster, not a human. I would read more Marxist stuff if they weren't such god-awful writers. I would like to understand what exactly. I know enough to be very confused about their, interpretations and the labor theory of value and all the stuff about history and anything Marxist. I know enough about it to be very confused. So dive in someday.
Was it Rothbard in? Where did he write this? Oh, he wrote it in an essay called "Confiscation and the Homestead Principle," and that was during his lefty phase, which he should never have left.
Shut up, Clark.
No, don't even defend post-left Rothbard to me.
Post.
He never fully left Corey. Don't worry, he never fully.
He was he was like pretty left like.
I can let this happen.
No, let's must control this.
And confiscation of the homestead principle, which I don't even know if that's available on Mises.org because of their stupid fucking redesign, but if you find that online, you should read it. It's very short. And Rothbard talks about this. He briefly talks about who the state is. And he points out, like Jeff said, it's a human institution. It's made up of people. It's not bizarre, faceless monolith. It's made up of individuals, with their own goals and desires, right? So, and then he talks about how then how should we consider the military-industrial complex and kind of corporations that are primarily or majority owned by the state? And he was saying that, well, we should do them similarly as parts of the state apparatus. And then he goes on to defend workers seizing the means of production of the military-industrial corporation.
Oh, man!
No, I told you, Rothbard got pretty left. By far his most.
You're seizing any means of production, you're getting pretty left.
I like his argument though because he was saying that basically since the corporations are primarily owned by the state, that was obviously funded through taxation, so that was illegitimate ownership. So the workers were actually homesteading the capital that they worked on and the land that they worked on, so it was rightfully theirs.
Well, that's the endless question, and this is why it's good to debate with social anarchists like my cousin in the East Bay, black hoodie type of anarchist. Because if you talk to them, it's so good for your brain to talk about their impressions of property and their impressions of the way the world works. And I wasn't convinced, but it felt a lot more worthwhile than trying to tell yet another liberal that Obama was also a douchebag. But what was the point of that? I swear there was one.
I don't consider calling Obama a douchebag to liberals.
Well, okay, no, that is a good activity. No, okay, I've asked even my dad. My dad is sort of Milton Friedman was kind of his guy. If he gets cranky, he gets more radical, but he's he's a minarchist. And I asked him, I think I asked him once, why can't we steal from Yellow Cab? Because Yellow Cab has this unfair cartel in Pittsburgh, and you can't get a cab to save your life. So why can't we just redistribute some of the wealth from Yellow Cab, take some of it off the top, because they're preventing by needling at the local government to prevent competition, and yet they're providing just non-existent service. And his only answer for me was, well, because we don't want to be as bad as the state, which is both a totally unsatisfying and somehow a great answer to me. When you get into yes, go on, Jeff.
Well, just was saying something. One quick thing about Murray. Murray learned from Murray's intellectual apparatus was complicated. He was much more Randian than people think. He was also much more left-wing and Marxian than people think. Not in the sense of libertarian value or anything, but he read the Marxists, loved the Marxists for their radicalism. So he had a richer view of this variously. He didn't always sustain it, but he had a richer view of what the state is than most libertarians. It's actually tremendously boring when you get into libertarian literature on the state. Once you get the main message that the state exists and it's bad, it's hard to get much more information from the literature on the subject. Whether you're talking about Albert J. Nock or Frank Trotterfall, who had some good, interesting views. You really have to get really into the deeper lefty scholarly literature to get a clear sense of what the state is and what it does. And Rothbard variously did that. His power elite stuff that he really got. He understood the complex relationship between business and government. In other words, it's a very intriguing relationship. And there's profound implications because what I take from a deeper understanding is that we have a much bigger problem than just electing the right people. This is really a distraction. It's not really the core of the issue. And I suspect, Lucy, that you were going to ask about political activism on the part of libertarians, and I'm not real quick to put it down all the time, just because I think there's a certain consumption value there that people really enjoy, and it's demonstrated preference. You like politics, so go for it, whatever. But I'm not very optimistic, really, at all about the prospects of change from the top down. Really, it seems to me the change is going to come from the bottom up, regardless of political activism.
There's a practical, like the decline of the drug war. Politicians are pretending that they've invented this cooling off of the drug war, but they're really following. They're following behind, and they're seeing that 100 million Americans have smoked pot. I believe I looked it up once. And they're following behind and saying, all right, well, I was just about to mention that we should probably decrease these draconian penalties against pot. I swear, I was just about to mention it. And suddenly it's become okay to talk about this thing. And that, even just that, proves that the political process can help people, because we're going to help them by not sending them to prison in the first place. And there's actually been this great movement on reducing mandatory minimums and getting the whole
But Lucy, there's more to it than that, and I didn't entirely understand. I was thinking through this the other day because I was talking to somebody who works for the Fully Informed Jewelry Association, and Corey and Joe, I'd be interested in your comments about this. But I wasn't entirely, I hadn't connected the dots yet before she said this. But one of the problems is that prosecutors are actually less and less willing to bring these cases to trial because they can't find jurors who are willing to convict. The grandmothers who are using medical marijuana. They can't find.
I hope that's true. I mean.
Yeah, this is a major thing. I mean, most of the nullification kind of jury cases we've seen recently are just juries unwilling to send people to jail or punish them, even though they've clearly violated the law. And this has diminished the will on the part of state actors like elected prosecutors to even bring these cases to trial. So we're seeing the laws break down in part response to this kind of non-compliance, on the part of regular people. Don't you find that extraordinary? To me, that's just really very exciting to think of. I mean, I'm very interested in this process of state breakdown. Like, how does it happen?
Yeah.
And its mechanics.
I'm allowed to laugh at it.
And this is one of the ways it happens, is that people are just like the state really needs us to bolster its apparatus, and if we're unwilling at the margin to make their power possible, it's exactly like Etienne de la Boétie said. Eventually, the power just kind of crumbles. This is a very particular instance of that. I'd love to see libertarians document this a little bit more and explain it a little bit more to us.
Like it's like a metaphor of the people who explore urban ruins and take pictures, and that's what we're gonna go on, Jeff.
That's it.
It's an interesting mechanism. I didn't know that. That the people, they see these laws, they think they're unjust, and it's an interesting mechanism that, I don't think anyone really, well, I mean, I'm sure people have, but most people don't think about this kind of other way to kind of circumvent bad laws through, something like juries. And, now that the government can't control as much information about marijuana, the more people, learn about it, these are some of the things, that the government, it is kind of causing a breakdown of the government. The more information people get about whether it be marijuana or any other law, they can almost kind of take matters into their own hands if, enough people kind of get the right information. And I think, the rise of the internet and stuff is helping to accelerate kind of the breakdown of some of these bad laws where the government could control things before, but now that the information is available.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just the information, it's the technology in general. I mean, 10 years ago, if you went to a concert, like a Lady Gaga concert, and took in a camera to record it and tried to post your video online, you'd be faced with criminal penalties. Today at a Lady Gaga concert, 2/3 of the audience is holding up their cell phones the entire time, recording the thing. And this is another example of civil disobedience of sorts. It's breaking down
YouTube is disobedience, absolutely.
I think that touches on really the two important points, and this goes back to what I was saying about the state basically being propped up by a certain kind of culture. Because I think first you're going to have two revolutions. You're going to have the technological revolution, which is going on right now in front of us, technology is letting people circumvent so many laws. It's completely making the horrible, immoral, inefficient IP laws practically irrelevant now. The more people use things like torrent and everything, and after the technological revolution, after everybody is really free to exchange information at such a fast rate, then you're going to have the culture revolution. Then you're going to change people's minds, and then after the culture revolution, the state is going to go away automatically.
I hope that's true. Joe, do you remember the NBC miniseries called Merlin that was on in the 90s? I know you do. Okay, so at the end, Merlin, like Queen Mab, who's this horrible, powerful, is she a witch? I don't know. She's a fairy queen.
Yes.
Whatever. The point is she's evil, and the point with these old gods is that if you don't believe in them, they will go away. And so at the end, Merlin's going to do his own thing and stuff, and like everybody, they all stop believing in Mab, and she goes away. So
that's
I'm hoping that's...
Stop believing in government.
Yeah, that's what I thought of that before.
It helps when you're white and, have the right technology.
The privilege to ignore the state is absolutely a thing. That's totally a thing. Mostly lucky us. What'd you say?
The privilege to fight against the state in general. Not everybody has the time or resources, like...
Again, yeah, definitely.
And all that bullshit. Like, people are, like, scraping by. But with the technological revolution, that becomes, people having more free time and more ability to learn about the state. It becomes more and more of a possibility.
The idea that if there's just enough information, they're suddenly going to stop being the horrible utopians that statists are. It's a little more optimistic than I am for some reason, though. I don't know. Like, there's enough information out there that you can still just enforce your own views that if we get, a lady president, then misogyny will go away, and etc. I mean, there's always a deal to make with yourself if you believe that you can fix things in this state sort of way.
I'm so glad in many ways that Obama was elected, because we finally put to rest this idea that somehow if we get a black man as president, that's going to free black Americans from oppression. Like it didn't happen, and now we're on the second term, and it's still just the same idiotic nation state, racist state that there's always been. So I'm hoping that it's going to kind of radicalize people who are concerned about institutionalized racism and realize that the state top-down reform is not the way to go. That we need a more structural revolution from below.
We need a woman. We need Clinton 2016, and everyone will realize it's they go on it. Okay, if it's not a black man, let's go the woman, and then after that, when it still sucks, maybe maybe like an Indian or a Muslim, and then.
And then at some point, people are going to say, you know what, it's just the state that sucks.
Hopefully.
What's the common element here? Let me do the figures. Oh, yeah. I think I got it. Well, hopefully they're going to get it.
We're about in an hour now.
Thank you, Ombudsman. Well, we can always save... I was going to talk about horrible... Joe, did you see the Colbert Report thing with the Free Keene people? Have you experienced this?
No, I
actually watched it. I watched it earlier today. And,
did you?
Yeah, and of course it's deeply embarrassing. But on one hand, I'm glad that they didn't mention the Free State Project. It was all about Keene, and it was a little bit of a comedy thing. And it's funny. I didn't realize just how annoying that these Robin Hood meter people had actually become. I imagined that they were actually helping people and not just being these little trolls out on the street. But so it was embarrassing. On the other hand, did you see it, Corey?
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Okay, this is a funny video. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't use the internet that often, really. Social media is not my thing.
Okay,
clearly.
Colbert Report makes fun of the Free Keene Robin Hood parking meter people. And You know, and of course, you know, the guy who hates my guts from now to the end of time, Cantwell, you know, comes
Oh, he
across.
hates us all. I mean, he
Yeah,
seems to be full of.
Yeah, I'm a big Cantwell fan, though. Just
yeah, yeah, and there's a clip in there where he's actually using some, you know, you know, weaponry against shooting an American flag, you know, for target practice, you know, so it's
So edgy. So
yeah,
edgy.
right. So it's awesome. That's actually the most shocking moment in the entire report was seeing Chris Cantwell using.
wait, Chris Kent was on the he was on the Colbert Report.
Okay.
Yesterday.
Corey, let me tell you how it went down. Okay, there was
I gotta look this up.
Stephen Colbert. There was a little segment from I don't know when, yesterday or the day before, and he, you know, interviews three people from Free Keene who've been doing what they call Robin Hooding, which is you put the money in the parking meters before they expire, which I think is great. That in itself is great. But being macho flash libertarians, they couldn't leave it at that, and they had to go follow meter maids and yell at them down the street, feeling within every second that they were just destroying the state with everything they held at the meter maids.
What were they doing initially? Putting money in the meters?
The parking meters to prevent parking tickets, which is fine. Like, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
That'll bring down the state.
I don't know. That just like I don't know.
It was. I mean, it's what I read an essay once.
I thought it was kind of sweet. I mean, you know, it's fine. It's fine to do that. I mean, there's a slight problem that.
I love the money thing. It's the rest of it that's ridiculous.
They're embarrassing libertarianism for everyone.
I don't think Stephen Colbert even had to do like he didn't have to edit them that much. Like the entire segment was literally just look at these idiots.
All he could have done was pull up Cantwell's site, and it would have embarrassed libertarians.
That's enough. But you know, there's that other guy, that sweet guy who said he's the yin and the state is the yang. Remember that guy?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know him, but my heart went out to him. I thought he was very sweet. And you know, look, everybody, we know what the problem is. The problem is that libertarians don't have enough to do, right? We're against the state, but we don't know what to do with that, other than hate the guts of mom and dad and our next door neighbors, you know. But beyond that, we're out of ideas.
Yeah, but
so I think we need creative thought, and I actually think that this Robin Hooding ideas is not a terrible idea, actually. I mean, it's something for people to do, you know. It's fine, but yeah, to be annoying like that, you know. And we don't know to what extent. You say that Colbert didn't edit it, maybe not.
It feels that way in my heart, but I can be wrong.
He's notorious for just asking people the same questions over and over again until he gets the answer. And there's a lot that we can do, and I've obviously dedicated a lot of my professional career over the last couple of years to figuring out these specifics, you know, about how we can reform the system from the ground up, just as the left did, you know, a century ago. But I think that's what's really driving this whole thing. Really, it's just that people just don't. They have too much time on their hands. But yeah, to demonize the meter maids, you know, as being the embodiment of the state, is a little bit strange.
I'm going to say that the guy who was in Iraq who acted like being a meter maid in Keene was more traumatic. He did not earn my sympathy in the slightest.
I know what you mean.
There's something at least as repellent about him as about the rest of them. I kind of hated him on sight. The idea that the meter maid is, I mean, like police use tickets and speed traps and such to gain revenue to support their endeavors. Like we're not going to dispute that. But to start with the meter maid in terms of harassment and to act as if, I mean, I don't change my mind about the threat of communism if a schizophrenic guy on the corner yells at me about communism. The idea that yelling at somebody is going to change their mind is just patently ridiculous.
But you know, I think what Joe said is very interesting to me. He said, you know, that these people are an embarrassment to libertarianism. They're embarrassing our cause. And I know exactly what you mean, but here's just a kind of a warning. The more prominent that libertarianism becomes as a kind of ideological force, and in all of its rough edges, and I mean even Cantwell here, all right, the more we're going to be called, we're going to see reports like this. By the national media, they're going to make us look really, really bad. I mean, this is the beginning of a long trend where all of us are going to be cornered, and this happened to my friend Peter Schiff, right? I mean, he did like a 2-hour interview on I don't know what show it was, but he said it just in passing that he didn't think a retarded person was worth $7 an hour, that they should probably be working for $2 an hour, and that became like this big national scandal, right? And then everybody was against it. But the thing is that not all of us are prepared to deal with the national media in ways that show us at our best, and they're going to pick out the thing that's worst about us, So I guess I'm a little bit cautious to completely jump on the Free Keene movement and say, look, you made us look like idiots, just because I'm afraid, really. Not afraid, but I suspect that if a national reporter got me in a room for 2 hours and interviewed me on my views, that and it ended up as a 20-second segment, on CBS or something like that, that I might come across like a very dangerous and idiotic person,
That's the thing. That's the thing with Colbert and Oliver and Stewart and Salon and Slade and all these other places that they're looking to kind of catch libertarianism at its worst.
That's why they fucking picked Christopher Cantwell as a guy to talk
right.
about.
I mean, they know that.
Because I've read Cantwell. That's the reason I'm not going to give him much of the benefit of the doubt, because he seems fundamentally awful for lots of reasons.
There's always
the way he expresses himself.
But
generally, though, you're right. I mean, like the media gets to control the narrative, and people who look a lot more sane and sensible and respectable than Cantwell look terrible. I always think of Rand Paul talking about the Civil Rights Act. He was very nuanced back when he was first elected to the Senate.
I thought so too.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, and then there's this horrible Rachel Maddow interview where she keeps grandstanding and putting words in his mouth, and all he said was, anything that we would say, which is the part where you tell private businesses how to run their private business is the part that makes us a little uncomfortable. But the rest of the Civil Rights Act was basically like vitally necessary. But you can't be that nuanced about a subject like that, because they won't let you, especially if you're fringy at all. They just won't.
Yeah, I thought he was very, very thoughtful in that interview with Rachel Maddow. I mean, I thought he was searching deep and trying to solve a kind of fundamental practical issue in light of libertarian moral concerns. I mean, I thought he was brilliant. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that kind of nuance and depth, it's just lost on people like Maddow.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on Rand Paul, by the way?
That's not it.
We don't have the time for that, Corey.
Good.
Mute him, Lucy, mute him.
He hasn't been on in months. I'm not going to mute him. I missed it. Corey.
It makes me laugh. It's by now a meme, but
it's definitely.
But it's very funny. I still like it.
Did y'all see that the guy in one of the Facebook groups where he was arguing that we shouldn't end the drug war? He was an anarchist. He was saying we shouldn't end the drug war because we should, like, a slave wouldn't beg his master for like food or something.
Nice. That's
it made no sense. But it was so funny. It was
that's the type of person who needs to sit in a dark room and just hug their principles tight and never leave.
Honestly, I am so against this idea of a libertarian movement. I think we need every. No, I am. I don't think we need a movement. What I want is a decentralized assembly of of wackos and crazies of every conceivable sort.
That
You know,
sounds
to
nice.
just break down, yeah, and every way, without any central organization, no leaders, no message. You know, to me, that's the right way forward. So I would even defend Cantwell's right to shoot the American flag with an AK-47 or whatever the hell he was doing.
That's the least objectionable thing amongst some things that he's done.
But it was the single most shocking thing on that segment. You have to admit.
Well, it's
It
at
was
least
shocking.
it's the part that would shock the right, to be sure. But the idea that the meter maids, like the state starts with the meter maids, so we better start harassing them there is foolish. I don't know. Again, like we've gone at this for ages now. And the whole "who is the state" thing, I still almost feel like I could talk about it more and more.
Well, we could talk about. Let's have another podcast on that subject, actually, because it's a really interesting topic, and I think we need to think more seriously about it. Yeah, we need to think seriously about it.
What's that, Court?
What's that?
Cantwell's part.
You think Cantwell's part of the state?
Yeah, definitely. I bet money on it. I bet Bitcoin. I bet Dogecoin. Lori Rice is watching. Lori, I'm gonna bet Dogecoin that Cantwell. That's how you know I'm serious about this.
Okay.
Either a cop or just like the dumbest man on the planet.
Well, Jeff, if you at some point later in life want to get a what is the state, who is the state panel together, I would like that very much.
I would love that. I would love that idea. I'm so intrigued by that topic. I feel like it's my next big thing I want to write about because it's complex, but it's crucial because libertarians are ridiculously simple-minded about the topic. We don't know our enemy, which is amazing to think about, but it's just true.
Yeah, well, if you read about it, that'll give us a hook to talk about it some more as well.
Okay, we'll do it.
All right, we'll do the final quick segment, which is where you guys tell me one or two things you've been enjoying in the past week that's not at all related to politics. And we'll start with Joe, I guess.
I got nothing.
Yeah, oh, come on. This comes up every podcast, Joe. You got nothing?
I've been playing a lot of Minecraft, all right?
Okay,
I'm building my own world. It's beautiful.
You're building things. That's a beautiful thing. You're building things and creating things. Minecraft, that's what it's all about.
See, Joe, that was fine. Corey?
Oh, it's just spontaneous. Everything just, there's no government in Minecraft. Just my free will.
That's right.
Very Randy interview.
Enemy of anarchy.
Corey, what about you?
The past week? I don't know. I've been really busy. I didn't do anything besides politics.
You guys are...
What kind of answer is that?
What? Y'all are bad at this.
Corey, you're a brilliant, amazing person. Why don't you talk about the time that you went to this commie co-op and slurped down a bunch of veggie stew?
That place was good. Get out of here. All right.
No, it was disgusting. And then, by the way, after we left the commie co-op that was giving out vegetable gruel to us, we immediately went back to the conference and ordered beef burritos. Let me just point that out. That was made us happy. So, anyway.
The co-op place was good. Like I don't think you really gave it a fair shot.
When did this take place?
Libertopia.
You bastards at Libertopia. Don't speak.
Yeah, so
never been. Don't speak of it.
All right, never mind then.
There was no consumer service at this place. I mean, it was just I felt like I was in some dystopian novel written in the 1890s in Germany or something. It was just horrible.
You're gonna ruin the place's business.
What? It wasn't
ruin the place's business.
All right.
Who's this libertarian that's talking about how shitty our school is? What's even there?
Okay, can I just say something that I'm enjoying immensely right now?
Yes,
and that
of course.
is the inevitable and like accelerating collapse of the pretentious and pompous wine industry.
Okay.
I'm so thrilled by it.
That's more Schadenfreude than I expected from you in terms of businesses.
No, but I'm sick of these people and their names and their fun plants when they're stupid corks, and everything associated with wine. You have to smell it, and you have to have a special tool to pull it out, and they're breaking the bank, just to drink the crap, and I'm just fed up with it all. And I love that people are catching on to this whole racket and buying large jug wines with screw tops that turned out to be actually completely delicious. So this is extraordinary to me, and it's a revolution taking place. It's true you haven't read about it, but that's the way revolutions happen. They're just they seemingly happen overnight, but you can see the foundations of this entire global cartel of looters and scammers who are just collapsing. They're on their last legs. I can just feel it.
Information. The consumer is getting all their information.
They're getting it. They're figuring it out, and it's thrilling. I mean, it shows that power just can't last in the face of when the revolution. When the time for the revolution is here, it's here, and nothing's going to stop it. So that's where we are. Up with Carlo Rossi, and down with Monsieur de Pop de Bleu. That's what I have to say.
Lucy, your microphone's not working.
I think the wine cartel is worse in the state, by far, to be honest. It is. Destruction.
I would say they're at least as evil.
At least.
Yeah, probably people spend more on pompous, pretentious wines every year than they do on taxes. So I think you've got a good point there.
Lucy, is your microphone working yet? No, it's not.
The microphone does not work.
The show because
we've lost our host. So, Lucy, I think I'm going to wrap it up. If I may take this one.
Okay.
Oh wait, no, she's giving me the finger.
Control freak.
Nothing, Lucy.
It's not happening, Lucy.
All right. Well, this has been another exciting episode of the Stag Blog. Or people.
What?
Oh God, she's giving me the finger again.
Locked it up.
Oh, now she's typing.
Your microphone does not work, Lucy.
Susie, just type what you were going to say.
Ask them to promote their stuff. Okay.
All right. Corey, or Jeff, you go first. Jeff.
Okay, come to liberty.me. We've got the most exciting content of any liberty-minded site on the web. So people should not just come, but they should join. 30 days for free, and then you're in for just a few bucks a month. It's the way to go. Liberty.me.
All right, Corey, where can we see your works?
Yeah, just continue the fight against the wine cartels. Continue harassing meter maids and invest in Dogecoin are the three main things.
That has nothing to do with what you've been writing, but thank you anyway. If anyone wants to take a shot at Lucy while she can't speak, feel free. Lucy, you don't have a microphone. You can see Lucy's work at Rare, Vice, antiwar.com, the Stag Blog. She writes for whoever. She's a mercenary. Anything else? Okay, I think we're good. This has been episode 12 of Politics for People Who Hate Politics. I'm Joe Steigerwald, and Lucy Steigerwald is microphoneless, but if she was here, she would say, see you next time.
Bye-bye.